enable closed captioning at the menu bar at the bottom of your screen. We are going to have individual videos turned off during the presentation, and we're going to ask that you remain muted throughout the talk. But we encourage you to ask questions in the chat box throughout the evening. We're going to be collecting them throughout the talk for the Q&A at the end. Now we would like to start this evening's program with the reading of Mofa's land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that the Florida State University Museum of Fine Arts is located on the land that is the ancestral and traditional territory of the Appalachian Nation, the Muskogee Creek Nation, the Mississippi Tribe of Florida, and the Seminole Tribe of Florida. We recognize the impact of historical trauma and dispossession and ongoing systemic inequities. We acknowledge the relationships of care that these indigenous nations continue to maintain with this land. And through this acknowledgement, we celebrate their resilience and strength then and now, and express our ongoing commitment to dismantle silence histories based on colonialism. We are so happy to have Jiha Moon here with us tonight. An exhibition of her work, Jiha Moon Chasing Spirits, is on view at Mofa until March 19th. And so we thought we would start the event tonight by sharing a short video of our installation of her work to kick off the event. And again, at Mofa until March 19th, so definitely come see it before then. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marty Fielding so he can introduce Jiha. Thank you again for joining us.
Good evening. My name is Marty Fielding, and I'm so excited to introduce Jiha Moon and welcome her to the Far and Away residency. The planning for this exhibition and visit started around a year ago when the Facility for Arts Research here at Florida State collaborated with the FSU Museum of Fine Art on a South Arts presentation grant. These are grants that support organizations in the southern states to present artists who live in the South. I would like to start by giving a heartfelt thank you to our funders. This presentation is funded in part by a grant from South Arts in partnership with the National Endowment for the Arts and the Florida Division of Arts and Culture. On behalf of FAR, the Facility for Arts Research, I would also like to thank the Florida State College of Fine Arts for their support and the Museum of Fine Art for being such excellent partners in this project. Thanks also go out to our community partners, the Council on Culture and Arts, and the Tallahassee Senior Center, where Jiha will be giving a workshop tomorrow. Jiha Moon is from DaeGu, Korea, and lives and works in Atlanta. She received an MFA from the University of Iowa City. And to quote her bio, Moon's gestural paintings, mixed media, ceramic sculpture, and installation explore fluid identities and the global movement of people and their cultures. She says, I'm a cartographer of cultures and an icon maker in my lucid worlds. Just to point out a couple of recent exhibitions, the work that's currently in this show at Mofa was previously installed at the Abrams Engel Institute of Visual Arts at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. And she just concluded an exhibition at the Derek Eller Gallery in New York in January. You can read reviews of the Derek Eller show in the New York Times and the New Yorker. And without further ado, please welcome Jiha Moon.
Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you so much for everybody's effort for having my exhibition here and introduce my work to the community. I'm really excited to be here. So without further ado, I will start talking about my work. And I brought a lot of slides, and I know how people are really engaged with images. So I'll prepare a lot of images. I brought like 75 slides. So I'm probably flip through really kind of fast. And then at the end of my talk, I'll have, take some questions and then we can go from there. So the introduction page, I put my, I guess 1, 2, 3, 4 solo shows title. And I'm really careful with the title. I wanted to pinpoint something really important that I want to talk about, and also carry the important theme or humor to come across with my content. So here you can see most everyone's met here. That was my traveling solo show at Housing Institute and also Taman Museum in Roanoke, Virginia, that traveled about 3 years and had an exhibition about almost 20 different institutions around the country, mostly Midwest and South. And then Enigmatic, that was an exhibition that I created a character based on the mask. And I had a show at their gallery in 2019. And Lucid Yellow was an exhibition at Lenny Contemporary, Savannah, Georgia, that I created a theme around the color yellow that sort of continued to my very recent solo show, Stranger Yellow, that I sort of focus on a social-political theme at using color yellow, and that just came down last month at their gallery in New York. So I thought that the title kind of introduced my work in general and really excites people. And starting from there, I have this quote that I got from Disney's animation, Alice in Wonderland, based in the novel in 1965, the children's novel done with the Lewis Carroll's, classic, novel for Alice in Wonderland. And I thought that this quote kind of introduces my main interest in conversation that people can kind of gravitate towards, like, oh, there's like the title you can kind of see from Mad Hair that I see in the exhibition here. And then there's also Cheshire Cat she often used in the characterize, that sort of portrait that pops out here and there in my ceramic work and painting. And also the Alice, like who we also project ourselves in the most very confused character that played important role. So this, quote kind of shows a lot of like content in my work, and I thought that was really nice introduction. And this is where I also got my title from that traveling solo show, Everyone's Met Here. Sort of represent our state of mind. As a human being, you see what's going on out there. You always feel like it's very post-apocalyptic and it's kind of dark, and also reflect our presence so much. And so I thought that was really relevant to show you this quote. In a way, also very interesting, like why am I engaging so much with the, animation of like Disney's, version of it. The classic version is already like known, but this is how I grew up as a child, like, looking at the Disney animation, and I make my connection with like American pop culture. It's very much like a Disney, animation oriented. So you'll see like what's classic, how we introduce the notion of like original idea, but then each generation we have spin-off of something different version. And growing up, like, this will be your way to understand classic. So there's a question that people kind of talk about: appropriation, appreciation. You're taking it to the next level or making it different. But like we all have our own version of like the memory of like how you engage with the bigger idea. And I thought that was really interesting. So I wanted to introduce that as a starting point. And, I also talk about like the bigger force, like, whether for some people that can be religion, for some people that can be your mom, that for me, like how I understand bigger force, something that you have to deal with, but you're not always have a control over. It could be nature, it could be your religion, like a God, like just as I mentioned. For me, it's like my mom. So I kind of think about often like Cheshire Cat, if that bigger four is like something really bigger four, something bigger and something you can't really control, I want that to be rather funny than scary. So so for the next slide, you'll see the way I sort of like make a portrait of a Cheshire Cat is that like my own version of it. So hybrid element is another thing that I often talk about in my work. So like one idea is not enough for me always to introduce something more complicated notion. So in this country, I'm really introduced like, the artists who are dealing with Eastern like versus Western, a combined idea. But my idea of like making work in general is always a hybrid form of like combining two or multiple things. So here, how can I introduce like portrait in a very landscape format? So something there, something sort of not there. And can it be portrait? Can it be landscape? Do you want to create some sort of like very big, like a sort of emotion, but at the same time, you can go kind of see the local area, look at some different iconography. So in general, I always sort of going after more complex, layered idea and how we deal with as an individual, almost like Alice, in the situation, how you deal with this difficult situation to introduce multiple ideas. So this is the way I sort of create the landscape portrait at the same time. So you'll see kind of like smiling face, but then it's there, but it's not there. Similar idea, like I use like some cultural iconography, but I really try to create the images that are very familiar and the foreign at the same time. So something you feel kind of familiar in this case, like, I've been looking at blue and white, imagery in the ceramic, that's really interesting overlap between Eastern and Western. We call it blue and white in, like the three Asian countries that are most engaged is among China, Japan, Korea, and we share so many interesting overlaps. But in Western history, in ceramic world, it's you probably see it as Delaware, and I sort of look at that idea and then seeing overlapping or something more conflict in a way, like how can I portray in my work? So I found this interesting pattern called blue willow, which is really appreciated and collected in Western history of ceramic, world. The idea is like exotic, like Asian love story, but designed by British people and collected widely in America. It's the idea of Asian love story, but invention is actually happening in Western culture. And oftentimes we really don't see that. And we, understand, oh, that's really popular. It's collecting, it's like an Asian love story. But like, that if you look at the origin carefully, that's from actually British, England. So it has nothing to do with the Asian love story. So it's like the idea of how we understand and explore the idea of exotic Asian, like, aesthetic is all actually a very Western idea. So you can kind of see like a color theme, blue and white. And then here and there, you can see kind of color patterns, blue willow patterns here and there. And then it's like really collecting all the different iconography, but then you can't really pinpoint, like, there's a, like, look like an angry bird. It actually looks like a peach shape. So there's like sort of like different like cultural reference, but kind of melding into something brand new. And then I have also different series, like, of course, as an artist, you have a different project going on. For one of my project for painting, as a media. So I have like loose hanji paper where I sort of honor the paper as an object. And there's another project that I sort of use hanji paper to wrap around the canvas or panel. So they're very westernized like perspective. And then this one, I sort of use that format as a very interesting dynamic, which I see not as sort of normalized as a Western art. So here I use fan shape as a painting format. So painting within another painting, and you're looking at it also like, you know, oh, this looks like some kind of icon or, you know, the window for another, like, you know, painting. So this, I call it fan painting series. So I singled out this project and then did it for about like maybe 10 years. So in the beginning, I produced like a singular fan painting. And here I sort of juxtapose against the backdrop. So there's a painting and then another painting behind it. So it kind of creates a conversation. As I go like along, I sort of have like a multiple fan painting series, as you will see later on. But this painting, particular painting, is really like exciting to talk about. So I wanted to introduce this painting for this talk. This painting called The Beautiful Country, and it's directly talks about America. So we call America Migu, which means beautiful country. And Korea is like a one nation, like one country. Jungkook, China, is like a central country. So it's really like the way we see like America as a beautiful country. And then when I think about America, like 4th of July is like a very significant Independence Day, and the firework is really celebrating. And so like, how do I intersect and then connect this different language using iconography? So I was thinking about fireworks as a flower, like chrysanthemum flowers, you know, so it's sort of like connect that like similar overlaps. And then as you see here, it says mi guk, you know, and then guk is kind of interesting word. It really doesn't mean anything bad. It means country or nation. But in this country, it can be derogatory terms to call Asian people. But really, guk means like nation or country. Or in Korea, like it's also, guk means like big pottage of soup, like, you know, so that a lot of people can share. So then you see the fortune cookie on the one side, on the left side, you know, it's another like a signifier, culture signifier that people misunderstand as an exotic Asian thing, but it's like fortune cookie is actually American invention. It's invented in, you know, San Francisco in the West Coast, you know, done by like Asian immigrant, like, you know, Chinese and Japanese. So like how much you include, you know, also look at yourself and see that you're as part of America, has been a question for me for a long time. All right, so I want you to move on to next slide. So you'll see the multiple fan paintings. And then here, like, you know, I wanted to sort of discuss the notion of like many different stories going on around the same time. I mean, this painting is done in like 2012, it's quite a long time ago. But, you know, like when you're on the social media, you're talking with a very close friend, like chatting, but at the same time you're watching the CNN, like what's going on in other country. And for me, that was a really conversation, something really as a collective, but also something very personal. Can it be going around at the same time? And that's pretty much how we are now. Now we are going through a pandemic, like it's a norm, like it's a conversation for everybody. So here, like, you know, you see that my imagery is like walking through another images, like, you know, little painting, fan painting as a unit, but as a whole, it creates diverse communication and connectivity around the country. So I was really engaged with that and trying to find the way to talk about something personal and something universal at the same time. Oh, okay, I found my cursor now. So I created this multiple fan painting as a series, and you can see the way I utilize pattern as a language, like, tie-dye was a kind of color theme here. Tie-dye is a big hippie culture in 60s, but at the same time, it's big, like, touristic culture too. So I sort of utilize that, as a culture signifier or pattern, like, that in time, it kind of translates in different ways. And then another, like a multiple fan paintings, that's where I started thinking about color yellow. It's really funny, like, you see Simpson is as a cartoon. It's a really ordinary American, like a suburb, nature. And your home, like your town name, like Springfield's everywhere. You can find a Springfield in name of any other small, like a town around the country. The Simpsons, they're all yellow, but they're not Asian. They're like American. So I kind of think about my color that way a lot. Like, why people call Asian yellow, we really know, not really yellow. My skin is not really yellow, but, but I want to connect that, sense of, like, I guess, like, community, like, hey, Simpsons are all yellow, like, smiley face is yellow, like, I guess they're all Asian, so I kind of like humor as a channel to discuss a bigger issues. And this one, and then the next one, I collaborated with my grandmother, and now she's a little too old to help, but she, like, is type of a hoarder. She collects a lot of things I have, like, in her room for a long time, and she never called herself as an artist, but like she always has like things around in her room, and then making things to, make quilts and blankets and for the house. And so, within the picture, it's a painting. And then I was like looking at Korean folk art and the letter design that also kind of sometimes didactic and like kind of lecturish people to behave a certain way. And I wanted to make sort of my version of like Korean folk art that can be legible, like written in English, and people are looking at it, oh my gosh, I don't even know Korean, but can I read this? Like, if you look at the text carefully, it says bless your heart. And that's one of the expression. Living in the South, like for a long time, it's a kind of like a joke, like it kind of goes both ways. Oh, bless your heart, like, I'm sorry you're not very, very smart, but also a sympathetic way, like, I feel you, like I hear your pain. So it could go kind of either way. So I wanted to sort of utilize that text in that way. And then of course, like the minority work, like the quilts, and my grandmother helped. And then the painting, and then it could be object like blanket, but it also looked like a frame. And then the more you use color, and then more minority you are, in some way, like color works in that, like almost a social political way. And I always, like, as a painter, that's my weapon. Like I can use all types of different color combinations and things like that. So it's like, it's my field to use. Like I'm not gonna reject using less color. I want to use a combination of different color to communicate with people. So here, I have this piece, and then a lot of like Hispanic people really respond to it because they see the similarity, and I almost like observe that and then use it more towards my work. So there is a lot of color going on. And this one, like I was kind of like exploring the duality of it, like, day and night, man and woman, yin and yang, like we always have to face that duality in our life. So in a visual language, I was exploring that idea. What's painted, what's collage, and what's stitched, what I really drew. That duality is kind of important for my work. And then here, from now on, we're getting closer to my current work now, 2019. So I'm really like, I need to make a statement, what I do with the color, and can I sort of minimize it? Like, I have such a maximalistic aesthetic, like, I use a lot of colors and iconographies and layer after another layer. I wanted to bring that bombastic or like overwhelmed feeling. As a person, we live in this like, post-apocalyptic world, and that's how I feel. And I wanted to create that atmosphere the most. But then at some point, I'm like, like instead of using all the weapons, can I just like focus on one thing and then sort of like make a statement where I was really thinking about me as a person of color, Asian, and also women, also artists who live in outside of big art world, like our cities, like, can I make things happen? Like, you know, I question myself that way all the time, and I start using color yellow as a statement. So it's one of my very first yellow wave series. And then I use like a big brush stroke. I start out looking at like Roy Wittgenstein's, like, you know, those iconographic, like a frozen moment, the brush stroke. But then I kind of take it to the next level. Like, you know, I'm not really looking at his work, but I want to reference, you know, American pop art, all the women that he beautifully depict with like a blonde, like Goldilocks. But then can I also talk about me being Asian? So that was kind of like me thinking out loud, using those colors, very sort of like single out and also put more emphasis on that. And then here, obviously, I sort of, I make this work during like Trump presidency, the magenta and the pink, there was a big movement, like I wanted to go to DC, but I couldn't do it. Like, how can I make that observation and react to it and then make work in my studio? So I use like yellow and the magenta, you know, as that color theme for this work. And then, yeah, keep going on. Like I invite sometimes like more iconography, sort of kind of going back and forth, but there's an agent that you can see repeatedly in my work that's like a yellow brush stroke. This one, I was kind of looking at the evil eyes and then also like, you know, circle as an agent, like to connect, like something very far away, something very close. Can I make that happen? So there's always a discussion that in my work that I want to bring those duality in my work. Often they're kind of opposite. And for me, it's really exciting, you know, because you have to have the other party to complete, you know, and you have to talk about, you know, all those things opposite. You need to talk about night in order to talk about your day. And you need to talk about earth and a death versus your life, you know. So those things like yin and yang kind of like duality is always like, you know, complete as a one. I guess like I was thinking a lot about that after I lost my dad, because like, you know, that was the biggest moment, like, you know, I feel so connected with him, but at the same time, like, you know, well, he's gone now, but like, you know, he completed his life because, you know, we celebrate his life in that way. So that was like a very personal but very memorable moment for me, and my work shifted a lot from that point. So this one is a print that I collaborate with the Flying Horse edition in Orlando. So you will see, like, I kind of still look at the traditional notion of like, you know, Asian art, but then I wanted to sort of take it to the next level. How do I talk about this in our generation? So I titled it Genie, because like this dragon, for me, it's like Genie trying to reach out and grabbing like banana. So it's another culture signifier. People will see his banana as a culture signifier, like a album cover, the Andy Warhol's Velvet Underground album cover, but also it's a culture signifier for Asian, especially second or third generation of Asian American who don't speak their traditional language, but that, you know, they're more American. So, you know, they call themselves like, you know, oh, yellow outside, white inside. So I kind of hear that joke from the student that I taught. And so, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then I also think about like, you know, yellow brush stroke, but also my own way of interpreting, like, you know, tie-dye. And then now you see all this type of crazy hair colors, like, you know, you see people dye their hair blonde and like blue or something they're not born with. So like here I'm entering that conversation. I'm start working with the clay. And then this is obviously, you know, a fortune cookie, and then I kind of stagger them. And, you know, I call it you and I, but I was literally thinking about being a mother, like, motherhood, me and my child. So you'll see often a lot, I will talk about more in the, like later on, but here are the objects, like, that we are familiar with, but then I sort of like adding on to other idea of like mask, and then the original history of like a fortune cookie, how misunderstood in this country, but like kind of like me being sarcastic or kind of giving back to it, like, this is an object that we look at it again when we talk about like, I guess Asian diaspora, but in a contemporary, like, world, you're looking at yourself and then you're sort of like calling us foreign, but like, this is part of us, like making a portrait to be available, like this is American portrait, and that's how I see it. And like me exploring with the like objects, like, I feel like object is such a friendly form. It's a small, people can collect, and everybody has a little vessel or teacups, and I feel like the power of the object is so I feel jealous, like as a painter, like, oh, the painting is like very cocky, like on a white wall that no one is supposed to touch. Whereas the like object is such friendly, like, object would, and like people collect things, like you go to your uncle's house, they have a little knickknacks and like, teapots or like things they collect as a souvenir, and like you instantly unguarded. And I want my object to do that, to connect with the people. So I guess that's how I started ceramic work. And here another object, this is my printmaking, it's 2D, but then it turned into 3D. It's a takeout box. So in 2D, you can kind of see like images all around. When you put together, it become like objects, like, oh, takeout box is familiar. So I sort of like kind of funny, kind of sarcastic, or like American humor. And I embrace that and to make my art objects. And this picture actually is 19th century Joseon period, the Yunbok Shin. He depicts all like Korean beauty in 19th century woman. You see this like a little objects. Like that's why I put this slide here, because I want you to kind of pay attention to these objects. And this is an object that has long history, like women's accessory they wear under their jacket, like, in hanbok, in traditional format. Now you will see souvenir like a decorated form in Chinatown, Koreatown. You'll see some people hang that like in their car, like, so sort of like a wishing charm. And it has interesting history. We call it Norige. And the main ornament is mostly made with precious gemstone or like jade or gold plate, things like that. The top part is a hand knotted element. People use silk and all types of different language, like, like we have all types of different knot, like chrysanthemum knot, ginger knot. It has all types of different sort of hand knotted elements. And the bottom is tassel, like silk tassel. So I thought that was really interesting. And it sort of indicates like social status in some way. The rich woman in here, she is supposed, this is from K-drama, like, you can see the jade, and the bottom is like a silk tassel, and you'll see the like the servants, like, they have the fabric ones. So I wanted to make an object like based on this, so I kind of did make, okay, there's another reference photo. This is like they don't really, I think they broke up. It's a Korean boy band called Big Bang. They were famous in my generation. So I'm generation X, Gen X, right? So they were really popular, but now like, boy band, like, what is it? What is the big boy band, in Korean boy band? They were like everywhere. Oh my gosh, why can't I remember? BTS, thank you, BTS, they're really big. Whether you look at their hairstyle, like these guys have dreadlocks and like green hair. No one really born with the green hair. That's the identity, is something you can change and then shift, and it become more than what you're born with. So here another reference photo, anime character, like, it's like, Asian obviously, but like wear blue contact lens. And then pony bees, like this little kid, like with the hairstyle. So I get often a question about like what you're doing cultural appropriation. And I don't know, I feel like it's my discussion is more than that. You know, I look at different culture, also different generation to make my work. Here, like Marie Antoinette, I got this, you know, picture from online, but it's like blue. Nobody's really born with the blue hair, but it's like over the top decorative elements. And then I start making my work. So these are all like, you know, have everything. They're a lot bigger than actual Norige, but in the middle part, I could explore with my ceramic work. You know, I can still build, make a form, still paint and draw. And on top, I'm using synthetic hair to make like knotted elements. And the bottom, instead of silk tassel, I like explore with the dreadlocks and like fishtails and other things. So I was obsessed with it. I made a lot of them, and then I just give people's name or the name that I've been thinking about. Like, so in a way, when you see them together, it's like a group of people that you feel like you've seen in the grocery store, at the mall, or like new like kids, like, you know, you can see them in a like coffee shop, and people just, you feel like you know them, but still very mysterious. And then I made a group of work and then present them together. They were very powerful in that way, almost like people standing together. And then after that, I realized like I was really kind of sick and tired of getting to learn how to do traditional hand knotted elements, because it was very hard, because when we were braided and there's a lot of lines, and then I followed that knots, it was so complicated, and I just wanted to do more what I wanted to do. So after that, I kind of moved to the ceramic area, that I make the face part a lot bigger. So I become sort of like more investigating, making a mask work. I still have the, you know, the like a hair, like synthetic hair part, but I could explore a lot more with that. Here I was like looking at like African mask, where it's called anang, usually face, and then there's another baby face on top. So I replaced with the fortune cookie. And then the, you know, pins that you kind of see like, oh, like sort of remind me of your childhood. And then the elements on the face is like a Korean folk art. So I kind of like sort of like explore more with the medium, and then give myself more freedom to explore, and then ended up having a weird like hybrid thing. So, and then I made a lot of masks, but I have only a few things here because I have a lot to talk about. Now we have a show here, it's all ceramic work. And then you're wondering like how my image translated on the surface of ceramic. So now we're looking at the ceramic work. As you can see, the March hare, that's one of my favorite character. And I plan to make a more different version of March hare. You can still see the part that I throw and then put together, but the fortune cookie, and there's a deconstructed area, there's hand-built area, there's thrown area, all sort of together to make something really new. And here you can see my, you know, earlier on my fan paintings, you know, I can explore the painting front and the back. That's what you can do when you do ceramic, so three-dimensionality, but I still have my identity as a painter, and then I still draw and paint a lot using language of like glaze, underglaze, and then using different, you know, clay bodies, so I could layer it sort of in a different way. But at the end of the day, the image you have is what you get, and then you see 2D and then 3D, and the different iconography is drawn, painted, or made, or both. And then I have some installation picture that you can kind of see how they work. So I used to have the format like, you know, sort of like imitating Asian tea party, like sort of exploring the idea of like exotic Asian culture. But these tables, you can get them in a Korean grocery store. Like people use it, it's a movable furniture. And this was at the Hudson Art Center in Duluth, Georgia. Me and Cosmo actually were in the same show at the Hudson's, like, you know, it's some type of competition show that I was in. And then it was interesting. This is actually Topman Museum, but I hope that I have that slide. Shoot, maybe I don't have the slide. Or the Japanese animation like festival, the anime character, they were the big mess they made, and they came and sit on the table, around the table. And that was really hilarious because they thought that was really inviting. So they kind of like came and sat down. Maybe I have that picture later on, but this is the one format of installation I did with the low table setting to instantly kind of like make people feel like they're very tall. So instead of using pedestal, you see this and you sort of like, look at the work really lower and then explore, walk around, that kind of make viewer like work. And I really like that idea. And I did it for a while, and now I kind of graduated from it because I've done it for a while. I wanted to explore a different way of, you know, showing my work. So I have a bunch of pictures. This is like a temple painting that monks paint. And, you know, I've looked at those a lot. It's very colorful, and they're very like sort of like a clean edge, like hard edge aesthetic. But in, you know, Asian country, this is like actually not just for the decorative purpose. Doing so, the birds don't build a nest. So there's like always have a different function too. And this atomy, like the Mexican, you know, embroidery, but it looks very similar to Korean folk art. The like a rainbow color patterns are very similar. So I'm showing some of the like inspirational photographs that you can kind of see where my color pattern or like, you know, color combination come from. This is my son, like 1-year birthday, a lot of fake fruits and like, you know, decoration, but see, like we celebrate with a lot of colors. And then I was obsessed with this like Cupid doll because the head shape looks like peach. So, and I kind of use it in my work and juxtapose with like different storytellings based on Korean folk art. And that's a friend of mine. I feel like it's like every father does that to a child. And it was like kind of funny, and I wanted to make the piece like that. So it's like called the Peach Eater. And that's a base joke from like Atlanta History Art Center. Like I look at a lot of base jokes, kind of part of like Southern like tradition. And I wanted to make my own version of Southern base joke, but using emoji. Like, so here, like well-thrown piece, and I just like cut the big like shape. For me, it's like a laughing mouth, like emoji like face. But then when I was in the art center with like, you know, before I had my home studio, ceramic communities kind of also, I feel like divided, and they call like a functional powder a very like, you know, homage. And then everything else is like a decoration. So like in fine art world, we don't call that, like decoration is used in a very negative sense. So it was a very kind of questionable for me. And then the people asked me like, oh, you're gonna put candle inside? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to. Is it okay the work is not doing anything? Because nobody asked that question to painting. Like painting doesn't have to have any function just to be like painting right on the wall. But like every time you make like piece look like a vessel or like utensil, people ask question, it's gonna be a function, like, you know. So in a way, my act is like canceling out that function. So it's a sculpture, right? Has a vessel form, and also sort of look like a modern portrait. And you know who that is? Princess Leia. Like I love that hairstyle. So I made a piece like called Leia, had a peach on the side, you know. So peach, it's one of my popular iconography. I've been living in the South more than 15 years, and I've been using peach as one of my iconography for a long time, but ever since I moved to Atlanta 15 years ago, right? People asking me like, oh, you're using peach because you're from the South? And I'm like, okay, yeah, hey, why not? Yeah, true. I'm just sort of observing and sort of like obsessing and using more of that. And this is Korean drag queen called Kimchi. Many of you probably know, very like popular in social media. And I love like the way she decorated herself and makeup and the fashion sense that was so fabulous. And I wanted to sort of honor, like influence her, like, you know, style. I wanted to make a pot called Kimchi. And then oftentimes my like, you know, the way I create pieces is like really based on my everyday life, being a mother, teacher, being a southerner, also originally from South Korea. All this, my life experience become a very influential on my own work. So I'm not only looking through like art history or things like that, but like everyday life experience is very much like how I get inspired by. And now we're entering up my last, like, you know, practice of my art. So these all from these works from my very recent solo show at DaeGu Gallery. So I'm really using fortune cookie to speak out loud. And the show title, The Stranger Yellow. And I think about like, if I name my own color as pigment, like, you know, you can buy at the store, what would you call? So I thought that, Stranger, like Stranger Thing was a really popular show, but at the same time, like, you know, stranger, like we are ever perpetual visitor, like we want to be part of this discussion, but people look at us and always, oh, where are you from? Like, you know, from China, from Korea, like we're ever a stranger. That's how I felt. So, hey, at the same time, stranger is such a kind of exotic, also reference of the others, right? So I call it Stranger Yellow, but like, so this is from that series, a Yellow Wave series, that I use big yellow brush stroke as a very main element. And then, you know, confetti, like here is like, you know, also our obsessive culture of like looking at the Instagram or texting with somebody. Like one of those like a really fun moment is like, happy birthday, congratulations, and then confetti like you know, pops on your cell phone. That's a little moment. I like, oh, that's so cute. I love it, you know? And I was like, how do I celebrate? I want to use that language to escalate it, elevate the being an Asian. So I like, I'm gonna throw myself confetti, you know, talking about this color yellow. So I use a lot of that in my recent body of work. Again, like, you know, it's on the surface, like I draw and paint a lot. So it's another surface to explore the same imagery. But once again, here I'm layering different way. I have a form, I have iconography, and I have my painting and drawing language on the surface of objects that are friendly. So it creates a really interesting dialogue. But how I see it is not so much different from my painting. So I create lots of these characters, and, you know, sometimes fortune cookie can be the hairstyle or arms or eyes, you know, those iconography kind of go between 2D and 3Ds, you know, that, you know, the pattern that I use, like blue willow, comes out in a different color. Here's the orange color, but it comes out in a different way, sort of like have a conversation in a different, like a format. Like you still continue the same conversation. I'm just exploring with the different like aesthetic and forms and colors. And banana, as you saw my banana in a print. So here as a banana peel, but here just really talk about, you know, like banana has been a conversation in so many different ways by different contemporary artists, like the latest one, I guess, banana with the duct tape. But here I'm really talking about Asian representation. And face jog. And then this is once again, it's a fan shape, front and the back. And then I write yellow as if like it's like Korean words, but you can read it. And then this is like really large painting, 60 inches by 120 inches. I sort of have to sort of hunker down and then tell myself, you cannot use so many colors because you have to value the yellow, and the yellow, that derogatory terms, how can I make it sunshine and more valued, and we put ourselves very out loud, and so we are no longer invisible. So I just like, I had a mission, like I wanted to make glorious painting using color yellow. So that's was the show title, Stranger Yellow, but I use it as a painting title as well. And that's the installation picture of the show. So here we use a table that are very high. So we bring the objects like almost like the same level as the painting. So you can see what I draw and paint in the same time. So they are like, instead of using low table, we really elevated low, like a really high. So at first it was kind of weird, but I'm really glad because all my objects are smaller, like they're not monumental size. I want them still to be very friendly and associated with everyday objects. So using that really high, tall, table was very helpful. So I believe that's my last slide. Yeah, so I'm done. So I can take any questions.
Thank you, Jiha. That was incredible, and your work is so dynamic. Our first question for you is, what sorts of material issues do you encounter when switching between painting and ceramic work? Do the different materials lend themselves better or worse for your iconographies?
It's definitely different, but I used to say that like my painting is like my husband and my ceramic is my boyfriend, but he did not like that. So I say it this way, it's fun. My painting is almost like my husband, my ceramics like my son, my 13-year-old son. They're so very different, but I also feel like the images are the most important thing that I create through my 2D work and also 3D work. Like what at the end of the day, like what do you remember is like the image, like that's what I care about. And then they can create really interesting dialogue between my painting and ceramic, but the act is like the same, the way I draw and paint on the ceramic surfaces or painting, the same act, right? How do we categorize and look at the work differently is the world doing it, right? So I'm interested in that. But for me, it's exactly same act. I just use different material and different way of deal with the materials. But I also love the fact that it's a different medium. So every time I work in my ceramic studio, I kind of feel like I'm like hitting the wall and I escape to my painting studio. And I do the same, like I work like on the painting for a while and then I go back to my ceramic studio. So it's fun, but at the same time it's a constant battle. Like I don't want to escape all the time. You have to stay with one piece when you have to figure things out. So there's that struggle going back and forth. Of course, I'm also a full-time lecturer at Georgia State University, so I have full-time teaching job. And of course, I have a son, I have a family, I'm a woman and I'm a mother. And how do you navigate all this? Like, I mean, it's the same, a pretty similar issue with like, how do you deal with painting? How do you deal with ceramic? How do you deal with other mixed media like work you have to make? So you have to, make a decision to move forward.
Thank you. If there's any other questions for Jiha, you're welcome to drop them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that. Okay, can you speak more about the role of humor in your work? Does humor allow you to address topics that are otherwise too challenging?
I think that humor is a great agent to ease things up and then to bring up the difficult issues, really have a good conversation. So I value humor really greatly. And in some ways, I almost kind of feel like my work is like a serious comedy. And I want the lighthearted elements, like using colors and then form in certain way that humorously. And yeah, I think it's kind of important. Like people wait a minute, they start looking at my work kind of misunderstanding at first. But that's the kind of point of departure. But then from that misunderstanding, they can build a conversation and enter to a serious conversation. And I think that is a very good way to talk about awkward, difficult issues. Like I never want to make work that are very didactic or lecturish, because like even having my 13-year-old son, like he will not listen to me if I like lecture him. He will just walk away. But good sense of humor is a really great entrance to have a good conversation.
Just thinking about that, actually, our next question is if you could talk a little bit about your piece Ollie Jug. So I don't know if you have a photo of it up on the or in your presentation.
So I try not to include all the like images that I have a show, I mean here, so people kind of see more images, and then maybe when they come see the show, they'll find the interesting overlaps, and it kind of creates an interesting way to look at my work. But so Ollie Jug is definitely inspired by my son. And so yes, definitely I wanted to have like a one sort of like a funny side, and then on the other side it's kind of monsterish face. And so for my face joke, like especially the not so much Yellow Wave series, but like for my face joke series that have so much personality, you'll see like a duality. Like one side is kind of funny, the other side is a little bit monsterish, and I want that to be together. Like, you know, I mean, we as a human, we're very complex people, you know, like we have that duality in ourselves. So I wanted to kind of show that. And like, not that I mean like my son is always monsterish, but he definitely has that quality, but he is adorable. He is so funny. And like, you know, I wanted to make the piece that are so lively and like likable and bring the sense of humor. So yeah, and he sometimes comments in my work. When he was a very young age, he came to my studio and like find the, you know, Angry Bird, and he will be like telling me like, why would not, you should play Angry Bird game, Mom, so you understand what it's like. You know, you have to know why Angry Bird is angry. You know, you're just using iconography, but you're not really playing the game. So he like, you know, he has like his opinion, but I really love that conversation because like, you know, conversation that I have, like not just only cultural references and like the commonality among like different cultures. Also generational conversation is really, I think it's really needed, because like if you think about it, the generation like around the country, regardless their gender, race, and like, you know, where they stand, like they are connected, you know. So there's a gap between older generation, younger generation, and the further generation that we haven't met. That's always ongoing gap. And how do we communicate with those people? You know, I think about it, like when I teach when I have a conversation with my student, I always like trying to remember these people gonna be the one teaching my son's generation, right? And like, I need to properly communicate. And that's really important, I think. So I often trying to understand that and trying to have that influence in my work.
Thank you. We'll take one more question. So is there any difference or similarities on how the American audiences versus the South Korean audiences respond to your work? Also, when I look at your yellow waves painted on your ceramics, it reminds me of noodles. Not sure if that's intentional when you painted it. Thank you for sharing. I love your work.
Remind of what? Noodle?
Noodles.
Noodles. That's so funny. Well, that's good to hear. Besides Louis Wittgenstein, right? I'm getting sick of it. I'm not even looking at his work, but it's funny. It's funny. So, so what was the first part? Remind me again.
The difference or similarities.
Korean. Yeah. That audience. I kind of stopped thinking about it, my audience, so much. I can tell you, when I had a show in Korea, my last show I had in Korea was 2011, and I felt like, or I need to focus on where I live and maybe just like focus on that first before I have a show. Like it was very hard juggling, trying to establish my audiences in both countries. Now it's a lot easier, internet, and people look at all over the country, like all over the world. I never feel ever so connected now. It's so weird because we are so like separated and we have to quarantine and all that, isolated. At the same time, I never felt so connected with my mom, who's so on the other side of the world, you know, because of social media and like technology, like bring us all together, feel like so united in some way, which I'm really thankful. But when I had a show in Korea, like, you know, they pick the similarity really fast, and they kind of see my work very Korean. So that was really interesting. I have one painting called Big Pennsylvania Dutch Korean painting. So it's about American folk art. And I did not use Korean folk art reference at all. It's all like, you know, Hexstein and like American, like Pennsylvania Dutch, you know, that's also another like conversation. But they kind of pick on it, a very similar folk art quality, and they look at it very Korean sort of aesthetic. And that's where I realized I just kind of like, you know, make work based on what I need, not to think about audience so much. Because like if you think about it that way, like it can be a little bit disappointing, or they are misunderstanding my part too. You know what I mean? So after that, that was my last show that I had in Korea in 2011. And then I haven't had much chance to sort of introduce my work, but knowing that someone will there looking at my work. But my work is reflect myself and then based on my experience, but I really don't want to have an audience specific audience. I don't want to limit myself that way. And like, you know, I'm just hoping that after I die, generation after generation, people will have a different read on my work. Because like, you know, I think that's what it's so great about visual art, because it's so intellectual. Yeah, because like I want to make work that I'm reflecting based on my current time. I want to do the most. I don't care about my work being like classical beauty, not at all. I'm reflecting where I live in 2021. I'm a woman of color and living in America, you know, that very specific, but it can be translated like, you know, in tremendously all around the country, also generationally. So in that way, I don't really want to limit or think about my audience. My audience were everybody, including the ones that are not born, if I dare to say that. But I like to think that it excites me. It excites me, you know.
Thank you. Just so everybody knows, I'm dropping the link to Jiha's website in the chat if you want to check it out and keep up with her work there. Thank you so much, Jiha, for such an incredible talk. Feel free to send some love Jiha's way in the chat as we end our conversation tonight. And thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.